What's the wildest thing a you up text has led to? The first post by GeoProg says, not a text but a phone call. About 10 years ago, maybe more, I was sleeping and around 2 AM I got a phone call from AHS ACH, which is Alberta Health Services, Alberta Children's Hospital. My wife is a nurse and she works at the ACH, so I groggily answered. On the other end was an upset sounding woman and she just said, "Can you come get me? My phone and car are dead in the parking lot." Sure babe, no problem. I get in my truck and make my way over to the hospital, booster cables and charging cord in hand. I'm gonna be a goddamn hero. I'm thinking to myself, I might even get something special out of this. I realise on the way I forgot my phone at home, but also didn't really care because the only person that would ever call me at 2 AM is waiting for me to save her in the parking lot of doom. I pull into the parking lot and look around. I don't see my wife's car, so I try the parkade. No luck. The other lot? No. So I park in the emergency lot and I'm about to go in to see if I can track her down through the hospital admin when I see a girl standing beside a car with the hood up. I ask her if she needs help and she says, "No, my phone is dead but my boyfriend is on the way to get me." Okay, cool. I go inside and go up to my wife's unit and ask if she's there. The unit clerk looks at me like I'm a complete nutjob and says, she's the educator now. She only works days." Right, yes, I do remember that. So I ask to use their phone and I call my wife. She picks up the phone, steaming mad at me, wondering why the f*** I left in the middle of the night, didn't take my phone and didn't tell her where I was going. I'm like, someone from the hospital called me and said they needed a boost. At this moment, I'm very confused. I tell her I'll be back shortly and we can talk it over. I go back out to my truck and see the same girl standing there. I get a strange feeling, so I ask her if she happened to call from the hospital at around 2 AM. She says yes and starts looking at me funny. I ask her what number she called and she says a number that is almost exactly the same as my number. It finally dawns on me. I laugh, I give her a boost and we part ways. I get home and explain what happened to my wife, who is very suspicious about the whole thing. Understandably. I had happened to get the call when she'd been in the washroom feeling a tad sick. Anyway, a few weeks later, one of the other nurses was telling my wife a funny story about how one of her friends accidentally called someone else's husband to boost her car one night and that idiot actually showed up. I was that idiot. My wife felt so bad for being suspicious of me that I did, in fact, get a little something special. It is incredibly unlikely that someone would accidentally type in your number from a number that could possibly be your wife. But I'm glad it worked out. Nice as well to start the episode with a story that has 2 happy endings. The next post is by Bored in Biloxi. Got a text from a buddy that he needed help at his house and it was urgent. Thought maybe they had a flood from a burst pipe or something like that. Nope. Turns out his wife fell off the sobriety wagon hard. They had a huge fight. Cops and EMS was called. She was transported to a hospital for mental health evaluation. The house was a wreck. Not like from the argument, but you can tell it's been falling apart for weeks. I helped wake their 2 kids and get them ready to go stay at a family member's house several hours away. All the while, I'm making sure he's not about to have an emotional breakdown as well. Another friend came over to watch the kids until the family got there. During this time, the hospital deemed the wife very unstable, but they didn't have the proper unit for her, so she got transported to a facility. She was heavily sedated due to her being hostile and having suicidal ideation, and it was a couple hours away. I drove my buddy there so he could take her personal items. We thought we'd be there a while, but basically the facility said there was nothing we could do there, and it would be best if he went home. I drove him back to his house, but I figured it wasn't a good idea to leave him alone in that state. I stayed with him, and he finally broke down. He told me everything that had been happening the past couple months. We started to clean up the house, then passed out after a long night. I ended up taking the rest of the week off to help him out and make sure he was good mentally. They're long divorced now, he along with the kids are in a good place. Her not so much, but it is what it is. Check on your friends often. Wow, everyone needs a friend like this guy. In the comments, Poison Waffle leaves a similar story. When I was in college, one of my friends who had moved a few hours away had been struggling with depression and self-harm. Late one night, I got a few weird texts from him that suggested that he'd gone off the deep end. Goodbye, cruel world kind of things. But when I texted or called him back, he didn't reply. I called 911 and gave them all his info, then started driving his way. Long story short, he'd taken several bottles of prescription pills and a lot of alcohol in an attempt to take his own life. Then he sent the texts before passing out. They took him to the ER in an ambulance and were able to save his life. He definitely would have died without intervention. At the ER, they detoxed him the best they could. If I recall correctly, they pumped his stomach and put charcoal or something in his stomach to absorb what they couldn't pump out. I stayed in a chair and slept beside him in the hospital for 2 days while he was out. He was in and out of consciousness a few times after the first day, but was too out of it to have any idea where he was or who was with him. After about 2 days, he was alert enough to know who I was and have a real conversation. And he was pretty grateful that I'd not only gotten him rescued, but that I'd stayed there with him too. The shitty part, for me at least, is that the thing that pushed him over the edge was that the girl we were both interested in had picked me instead of him. I don't recall all of the details at this point, but if I'd had more concern for my friend than for myself, he probably wouldn't have tried to end his own life. Dealing with the aftermath was the least I could do to make it up to him. He did get some help for his mental health, and in the long run, he did alright. The next post is by Kengra. When I was 14, I was about to fall asleep, and a classmate that I was acquaintances with texted me asking if I was awake. I told him that I was and asked what was up. He proceeded to invite me to come to his house and play board games with him and his parents. From that night on, he became my best friend, and about a decade later, we are still best friends. I moved abroad after we graduated high school, but I still visit him whenever I visit our hometown, and he also came to visit me in my new country of residence. We even both met our current partners through each other. I can't begin to imagine how differently my life would have played out if I never responded to his text that night. Someone in the comments asks what exactly his friend texted him, because asking an acquaintance to come and play board games with your family, I can't imagine is a 2-second text. OP responds and says, I wish I was joking, but he pretty much just explained that his family was playing a game, if I recall correctly it was Codenames, and they needed an even number of players, but they only had 3. I love board games, so I just replied asking for his address. The only other family members of his I met before that night were his older sisters. They were both in my orchestra class that year, and I was friends, but not super close, with them, so that familiarity may have helped. They weren't home that night though, so it was just him, his parents and me. Besides having a Snapchat streak and competing in a few regional orchestra competitions together, we never really spoke before that night. I have no idea what made him want to reach out to me in that moment. Whatever the reason, I'm forever grateful that he did. The next post is by, this person. I was staying away from family and friends in a different city and was relatively new to the city. A day before my 26th birthday, I told my friends not to call me at midnight as I wouldn't be able to answer and I wanted to sleep because I had a long week at work. Secretly, I was also missing all my people and hoping they didn't listen to my advice. My friends decided to WhatsApp me 5 minutes before midnight. Are you up? I said yes, but also told them that I'll be going to sleep soon. I suddenly hear my doorbell ring at that time, and 2 of my closest buds were there at my doorstep. They'd flown in from a different city to wish me happy birthday. For the first time in 15 years of knowing them, I broke down and hugged them. We went to a neighbourhood bar, and what a wild night it was. We spent it with one of the other tables where a group of ladies were celebrating their friend's bachelorette party. Nothing tops that experience. Beautiful core memory. The final post is by My Clever Username. This was back in high school. A friend of mine came from a pretty broken home, and both parents had remarried. He called me one night, absolutely hysterical. I couldn't figure out what was going on, but I knew he needed someone he trusted to come and be with him. Turns out he got super drunk and had his dad's gun and was ready to pull the trigger right before calling me. It was all over a messy situation where he'd fallen in love with his stepsister, but he knew he couldn't be with her. He'd never told anyone before this night. He didn't want me to call anyone else for help, so I sat up with him all night while he cried and poured his heart out. I distinctly remember being so tired but forcing myself to keep my eyes open because I felt like he really needed me to be there for him. He eventually got the help he needed, and even though he went through some really rough stretches with drugs and alcohol, he's still alive today. We haven't spoken in years, just due to growing up and drifting apart, but I know he's now married with kids and seems to be living a stable life. If you've ever had a text in the middle of the night where you've really had to be there for someone, please let me know in the comments. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time.